first question always is talk about your casting process for Traitors. Did you even know what it was? It was season one in Australia. Why did you want to do it? All that good stuff.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I was just scrolling through Instagram late at night, and then this weird advert popped up. It was just like super secret casting show, and I was like, okay. And it looked a bit kind of haunted house vibes, and I thought this could be interesting. And I just went through the application. It ended up being a psych test, basically, with all these questions. I think about an hour or so later, I finished the quiz, kind of forgot about it, submitted it, went to bed. And then a couple of days later, I got a phone call from one of the casting agents saying, "Oh, we want to talk more about it." And I thought, "Oh, it's a real thing. Okay, sure." And again, I still wasn't getting a lot of information about what the show was. And I didn't actually find out what the show was until I was cast, which was about a month later. So I was cast in February, and then I think they started shooting in June. So it was a long time of just sort of waiting to find out what I was doing.
Yeah, anyways, with the Traitors, you were a faithful. Were you like excited to be a faithful? Were you annoyed? Because at least for me, I would want to know everything that's going on. So I would hate like constantly being out of the loop. So what were your thoughts on that?
Um, the annoying thing is I was actually told by production that I was going to be a trader. So in like I think it was the last couple of weeks of my casting, they were like, "Oh, you would make a fantastic trader. We think your backstory is incredible. Like, you'd be the perfect fit for it. Do you reckon you'd be able to do it?" And I said, "Oh, it'd be great." I said, "I seem to have this kind of likable personality, and it would be so fun to kind of twist that and be a bit of a backstabber." So I went in fully knowing, like, or fully expecting that I would be a trader. Even the night before we started filming, um, the executive producers came to my room and they were just like, "Okay, so like when you're chosen to be a trader, this is what you're going to do, and this is how we'd love you to portray yourself." And I thought it's gonna be so much fun. And then we're in the room and I didn't get selected, and I was like, "Oh no, everything that I had planned is just out the window now." So from then on, I was kind of like, okay, I have no idea what's going to happen in this game.
I wonder if they told like everybody that or like who you were swapped out for or like what the case was that because that would be weird that they would tell you right off the bat because they want to be like anonymous, at least in the other versions that I've seen.
Yeah, I think how it works is they kind of pick who they believe would be a good trader based on their one meeting with you individually. But then when we all get together in the hotel and we're interacting with each other, because there's so many different personalities and so many different backgrounds and personal beliefs, I think that's when they realize who works best with who and who could actually work better as a trader. So I think being like reality TV, there is some structure to it, but you can't completely script it. So they must have just flipped things at the last minute, which I also think is how they decide who sits next to each other in the banishment room as well, because they didn't tell us that until we were about to go in. So I think
Yes.
it's a little bit of, casting there.
Yeah, so going into it, I feel like at least for me, I would have like low expectations going to a show because then when you exceed them, it's so much better. So what was the feeling like when you're not murdered night one? Because you have to think like maybe you could be a target because there's so many people and who knows what they're going to do. So what was that feeling walking into breakfast that first morning, be like, I did not get last place.
Yeah. To be quite honest, it's something that got me in trouble later in the game. It was just something I didn't think about because the day that we started filming, we were up at like 3 a.m. and that's when we started getting ready to shoot. And I think we were on location at about 9 a.m. and it's supposed to look like it's the evening. So I'm like, I hadn't really had breakfast and I get given a cocktail at 9 a.m. I'm like, oh God, okay, it's going to be one of these days. And then the first day of shooting went up until 10 p.m., I think.
Oh
So
God.
then we were exhausted, we were tired. We had all this information thrown at us. And after being held in like secluded lockdown for 3 days beforehand, it was such a just a sudden wave of attention. And then with like 20 or so cameras in your face as well, I think a lot of us were just exhausted. I know some people were just like, but wait, what? We've waited all this time and someone's getting murdered now. I think obviously the traders had a longer day because then they had to have their banishment meeting, or their murder meeting, if you will. So then I think when I woke up the next day, I was kind of like, okay, I'm still here. This is happening. All right, now what are we doing? And then it was, start the whole breakfast thing, and it we were still sort of learning what was happening. So I think a lot of us were just very confused. And for me, I was just like, what am I doing? Like, what is going on?
Yeah, so
Crazy.
going into the first challenge, how stressful was it being part of the graveyard search team? Because you really took a leadership role, and sometimes they figure they could just vote you out. Like if you fail, just because maybe you could suck at challenges, and they're like you're not contributing to the pot. So did that ever like cross your mind, or like because you ended up
It
doing well?
it did a little bit. The weird thing is we didn't actually know the rules of the game very well. So a lot of us also thought that the traitor's job was to sabotage the challenges, and then any lost silver, the traitors would win. Like they would keep it themselves. I think like majority of us actually thought that was the case. And during the graveyard challenge, we were going in with that idea. And I think at one point we'd counted up all the silver at the very end, and we're going back to the cars, and Sandra grabbed me and she's like, I need to talk to you about something. Like Mitty was acting really, really suspicious during the game, and he was deliberately like not answering the radio, and he was like trying to throw us off. And then when we turned around, we saw that production had grabbed Mitty and were getting him to like grab silver off the plinth and then like walk away. And I was like, are they staging him like stealing silver? Oh my God, he must be a traitor. And I think that's what kind of started our first night of, okay, Mitty's a traitor. So we all thought that there was a different set of rules happening, which led us to just having this weird idea. So I think it was a case of not, again, just not knowing how the game was played. And then I think production had to sit down with us and re-explain the rules. And I'm like, oh, we've been doing this wrong. Okay, fun. So I was just excited to do the challenge because I thought it was a lot of fun. But yeah, we all went in thinking that the game was being played very differently.
That's crazy. I've always thought like with reality shows like The Traitors and The Mole, where it's like there's a saboteur that ruins challenges, like they should get the money that's lost. Like I don't understand why they don't do that with like reality shows because it's more incentive for them to mess up and stuff. But going into episode
Yeah.
2, what was your reaction with the Chloe quit? Because she like clocked through Traitors and then just left, and I was like, it's completely out of nowhere. Was she just sick of production? Like, what was that?
I can give you quite a bit of insight on this one. So Chloe was legitimate. I honestly believe that she was legit. So when we first started voting, we were all originally going to vote for Mitty to be banished at the first banishment. And then all of a sudden we changed to Jack because of this rumor that happened, which never happened. Um, and then it was weird when we were sitting around doing the banishment. So the banishment takes about 4.5 hours to film. It's a long process. And we're kind of sitting there. We each get a chance to debate who we think the traders are. Like we have a full-on debate. Then we go around the table and each person gets a good probably like 10 minutes to talk about why they think this person is a trader. Um, and then from there, Chloe kind of came up and she's like, so I've consulted my spirit guides, and we all just kind of went, oh God, okay. And she's like, and they've told me that he had it coming. He had it coming. He only had himself to blame. And life is a cabaret because Jack, you're a cabaret performer. And I freaked out because she had just described me. Like, I'm a cabaret performer and my stage name is Jack. And I had just finished a run in Chicago, the musical, right before I started filming. So I was like, oh my God, she's actually predicting me, but there's a real person called Jack. So that's who she's aiming it at. And I am so shocked that no one saw my face because they would have been like, why are you acting so scared? And then after that, after he left, everyone's kind of like, okay, well, maybe Chloe's just not real. And then from then on, I was like, oh my God, I have to hide everything about myself from her because she knows exactly what is going on. And I'm actually quite annoyed that none of this was shown because it would have had such a great storyline of her basically predicting me, but aiming it at somebody else, and then me panicking because of it. And so I think by the time it came to the episode where she left, there was a lot going on. Like it was a very, very stressful banishment. They didn't show nearly everything that was portrayed because MK's reason for us banishing him was actually much more serious than what was led on. He was actually quite a rude, offensive person to a lot of people, and we just decided that in our best interest, and it's best not to have him in the game. Um, so the banishment actually ended up being quite dramatic. There were a few arguments. There was quite a lot of yelling. I, at one point, unleashed on MK so terribly that I had to apologize to a couple of people afterwards because it was quite full on. Tensions were really high. We had to stop filming, I think, twice during that banishment because everyone was just getting so fed up. Chloe actually left the room twice. So she got up and walked out because Fee also got taken out of the banishment because she was so angry. And then Chloe was brought back in. Fee was brought back in. We started filming. We sort of recapped where we were. And then she put her hand up and said, I'd like to leave. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So then she left again. And then she came back. And then we finished the banishment. And then she left again. So we had no idea what was going on. We just thought she was stressed. And then I think it's afterwards she said, I'd like to leave the room. And she walked out. That was actually after MK had gone. So it was edited in a way to sort of make it look very dramatic, but we just assumed that she was a bit stressed and just needed to leave. So yeah. But when she decided not to come back, I was like, okay, well, it must just be because this environment isn't for her. Like with her gift that she has, there's a lot of voices and she just doesn't know what's real and what isn't. So I think it was a wise choice for her to probably leave because it probably would have been very hard for her later on, like it was
Yeah.
for a lot of us.
So going into episode 3, how much fun was like that paintball challenge and like running and try to like not get captured by the paintball shooters and getting that additional like $2,000 of silver for your
It
team?
was
That looked really fun.
oh, it was a lot of fun. Because up until then, a lot of our challenges had been we were deciding like figuring out whether they were going to be like intellectual challenges or physical. And we don't get told anything until we're about to start it. And so we're all crazily trying to guess what it is when we're driving up to the venue. And as soon as we drove past the paintball sign, we're like, oh God, no, paintball. Um, and I think the hardest part of it was the field that we had to run through was actually full of potholes and like rocks and everything. So we're trying not to twist our ankles while also trying not to get shot. And so I thought, oh God, this is going to be the time where I prove that I'm a little bit athletic, which is definitely not me. Um, and I loved it. I just loved the idea of like running and ducking from the paintballs being fired at you, and you could hear them whistling past your head. And I thought, oh God, I'm in an action film. This is amazing. And I honestly did not expect to get through without being hit. But yeah, I think the adrenaline just kind of took over and worked in my favor.
So going into episode 4, what were your thoughts getting 2 votes against you? Because I would have been like pissed and I would be like, shit, when the first one comes, I'd be like, I'm gone. Everybody's voting for me. This is just terrible.
I originally, I mean, you can kind of tell in the first shot, I saw the fun side of it. I think I said, "Oh my God, yes, my name's on a slate. I'm part of the game now." Because up until then, I had no idea that people even suspected me. I thought that I was actually coasting under the radar quite well. Um, because it was, I think I even said as well at one point when someone's like, "Well, you never put a name out there." And I said, "Well, because I don't have enough evidence. Like, I'm not just gonna throw a name out because I know how risky that can be." I said, I rely on like hard evidence on people. I said, I can't just listen to something, twist it around to suit my narrative, and then throw their name out there like Fee does. Um, so it was a bit weird. And then when someone's like, I thought, oh God, you can get in trouble for not actually saying anything. I thought these people are out for blood. So it was kind of like, yay at first. And the second one, I was like, oh no, this is serious now. This is going to give people a reason to vote for me. So it was a bit weird, actually.
So going into that episode, why didn't anybody have like more suspicion on Nigel and Angus going for like the shield as traitors? Because this was the only version where it saved you from banishment and murder. So it was incentive for traitors to like actually get it. So why wasn't there more suspicion? Because if you're that desperate, you must be up to something.
Again, I think it was a really long day for people, so they didn't tell us we were doing a second challenge in one day. That was just something that was never done because it takes 2 days to film one episode. So one day is usually just hanging around the hotel doing chats and everything, and then the second day is the challenge. Um, so I think it was a bit odd because they snuck it on us really quickly. And we're like, wait, we're doing a second challenge. This is insane. And then we went out to the field and we weren't being told anything at all. And then all the production kept saying was, if you end up in the water, are you going to be okay? And I had to write down when I applied that one of my biggest phobias is open water. I was like, okay, can you please tell me what's going to like what the situation is? And they just refused to tell us. So I actually got really, really annoyed with production at one point and said, if you do not tell me what the challenge is, I will not be participating and I will walk off the set. And they're just like, no, no, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. So I was already so annoyed with that. Everyone was just a bit stressed because we weren't being told anything. We walked down to the lake and I thought, oh, this is going to be easy. And then Roger just sort of said, okay, go. And we didn't know what was happening because we always usually get a false start for the challenges before we actually do it. So we pretend to start and then we get stopped. We have a safety briefing and then we go. We didn't receive any of that for this. So there was no safety briefing whatsoever. We had no idea if it was actually safe or not. And I think not Angus had already been under the firing line a little bit. Like we'd already raised some suspicions about him. So I think he just ran. Nigel's a very competitive person, but I think also he was possibly trying to prove his innocence by being like, oh, this will help me from murder. But when we looked back at it, we're just like, every single person that ran into that lake was a traitor. And it was one of those like things that's just suddenly obvious when you think about it, which we all were a bit upset. But yeah,
It feels like watching the Traitors Australia was really weird because I feel like the traitors did everything that you're not supposed to do and somehow avoided like getting caught. Like they recruited somebody that's not an obvious traitor. Like I feel like you're supposed to recruit somebody who's obvious to use as like throw them under the bus. Like it did make sense and I'm honestly shocked. Not that like you were dumb or anything, but it's like it's honestly shocking as like to see how far they actually made it. Because I feel like they just did like everything wrong just from like what you're supposed to do. But
it's a bit cra yeah, because we were the first people to actually film an English speaking version of the show, so we had nothing to go on. We had no prior experience of the show whatsoever. Um, and for those of us that got early casting, we couldn't even watch any previous series because we just didn't have access to it. So it was a bit crazy, but I think it kind of worked that they did things you wouldn't expect because then we didn't know how the game was being played. We had no idea what their method was.
yeah, so then after that, how nervous were you going into episode 5 where you had to be the caller to identify like the matching items and the photos in that challenge and like that giant garden thing? Because like that it's always nervous to put yourself in a leadership role.
It is a bit, I think Teresa and I immediately volunteered for that position because we didn't want to run. We were just exhausted. And I thought, oh, I don't want to run again. I'm pretty good at describing things. I think everyone was kind of agreed that after the graveyard challenge, I was quite good at describing shapes and objects. And as soon as we walked up and looked at it, we're like, oh no, this is going to be quite different because we can do our job, but then we're relying on those people to actually go and get it. And I think there's an iconic moment where Teresa realizes that Claire and Craig have been put on the same team. And she says, who would put them on the same team? They've got a collective age of 150. And
It's
we just started laughing, which it was kind of true. Like they both worked so hard, but I'm like, oh, okay. And then Fee was, of course, just she wouldn't listen to the full instructions and they would just run. I'm like, this is chaos. Like, but it was relaxing for Teresa and I. We got a bit of time to sort of sit up on the balcony and kind of watch everyone. Got a tour of the mansion as well.
Yeah, so I gotta ask, what was your why did you vote for Paul of all people? To be honest with you, I don't understand how a man could be so invisible. I think I watched 8 episodes and he didn't even have one confessional.
Oof.
So who on earth? I
Uh,
didn't even know he was on the show, to be honest with you.
it's
And why
oh,
did you vote for him?
it's really weird watching how he was portrayed because he absolutely was not invisible. He was always so outspoken. He was always saying something. He was so present in every scene. So much so that we had to change the rules of the game were actually changed because of him. So he would bring props into the banishment and being like, this is my yellow card and my red card. And if I don't agree with what you're saying, I'm going to yellow card you. And if I think we should vote for you, I'm going to red card you. And production was like, actually, no, you can't do that. And then he snuck a note in as well. So we were completely forbidden to have any form of writing material or anything that we could use to create notes. And he'd used a magazine and actually tore up letters and made a note to Claire to try and prove that she wasn't Welsh. And it was so much stuff that he would do that couldn't actually be shown. So it was like a whole car trip to like one of the challenges where everything that he was saying was related to production or behind the scenes things or things that just could not be shown. So then anyone that was in the same scene as him couldn't have their footage shown. So I think in a way they had to edit him so that because a lot of the stuff he said just wouldn't have any context and it would have been so confusing. So I kind of feel bad that he did not get shown a lot because he had some moments that were actually quite good. But the biggest thing for us is that he was never nervous. So despite the amount of times we would be suspicious of him, he would always go into the banishment room smiling and joking and always having fun. Every morning when he came down for breakfast, he was as if nothing had ever happened. He's like, "Oh, is everyone great? Yeah, lovely, lovely." And I'm just like, how can you be so calm and collected? You obviously aren't worried about being murdered. You know that you're going to get through this game unscathed. You're obviously very suspicious. So I voted for him also as a bit of an attack on Kate because she kept saying I was never bringing new names to the table and I was always just agreeing with everyone else. I said, well, fine, well, let's look at a name that no one's brave enough to talk about. Paul, you are so calm and collected. You obviously have nothing to hide. You're not afraid of anything. You're obviously a traitor. So a couple of people other did vote for him as well, but they didn't show that, of course.
Yeah, so what was your reaction when a traitor was finally sent home? Oops. Oh no. Why? What was your okay, now you're back. Sorry, you froze for a sec. What
Oh
was
yeah,
your
hello.
reaction when the traitor was
All
finally
good.
sent home?
Oh, as you can see on the screen, we were all quite excited. I think we were by that stage when I think is when we voted for Angus, we were very, very sure that we had got one, but again, we just had no idea. Um, and I think we actually ended up blowing up some of the microphones when we found out he was a traitor because they adjust our audio as we're talking, and we're also quiet and just like whispering to each other, like, "Oh my God, I think we've got one." And then when he just said, "Oh no, you got me, I'm a traitor," we just screamed so loud that I think all of our levels just blew up and all the microphones just like went out. Um, so yeah, we're just so happy and finally excited because I think it was like a good couple of weeks and we finally got someone. Um, and yeah, so I think it was just what we needed because our morale was just so low. And I was like, oh, we finally got someone okay. So we were all just very happy, very excited. And then a little bit worried about what was going to happen because of that.
Yeah, so going into episode 6, how frustrating was it dealing with Matt in the plane challenge where you had to make those like safety symbols? Because he looked like he was driving everybody crazy. And I've never seen somebody like in a show just drive some people like so crazy, even if you know like he's not a traitor, just to vote him out just because he gets on your damn nerves.
Yeah, we had a little saying that he was batshit crazy, which is like a play on batshit crazy. So
Yeah.
it was kind of he was just kudos to him. His confidence, although misplaced, was very key. So he was always so confident in everything he did, which you have to be proud of, but also just the way he conducted himself was just so foolish. And we're like, okay, you're taking everyone like so far back. His obsession with Teresa just made zero sense. And I think during the plane challenge, we thought, okay, this is a mixture of intellect and physical strength because those planks of wood were so heavy and we had to drag them across like gravel and everything. Um, and so we were just like, okay, I think we just agreed to let him lead the team to shut him up and to prove that he's not as good as he thought he was. So he like did the challenge. We're all just like, oh God, this is chaos. We're not going to win this at all. So we're very shocked that we actually did. Um, and then he was just all over the shop, all over the place, and kind of thought, okay, maybe this will take him down a little bit. And I think there was that scene as well where I'm in the car with Teresa and Matt, and I was like, oh, I'm like a kid in a custody battle here. Like you two are arguing so much in the front seat, and I'm just sitting in the back. And he'd actually agreed that he was going to lay off from her and um like stop voting for her. And then he completely switched again. So we're all just so frustrated that he was just playing his own game and was he really was not a team player whatsoever. So we just kind of got rid of him because it wasn't going to change at all.
Yeah, so why do you think that Kate had it out for you? Because until like you went home, she never really gave an explanation and she voted for you like 3 or 4 times.
And part of that reason was I wasn't listening to her, so, which is hilarious because I was always like, "You're not listening to me, Kate." She's like, "You're actually not listening to me." The first time she voted for me had nothing to do with me whatsoever. She just thought that Craig was voting with the group and didn't have any original ideas. So she threw my name out there, thinking no one suspects him, like no one suspects Dirk, no one thinks he's a traitor. But if I threw a name out there, would he follow along? And I didn't hear that. And I just thought, oh, she's suspicious of me. Okay, she hates me. So I started sort of going for her a little bit. And production was saying, do you think Kate doesn't like you? I was like, you're right. She doesn't like me. Um, and I actually suspected that she was a traitor for a bit because every time someone would try to sort of prove her wrong, she would do these little things to kind of like twist it back a bit. And I realized that was just her sort of deflection technique. And I kind of misread the situation and thought, okay, well, she's just voting for me because she thinks I'm suspicious, which means that she's a traitor because she must know that I'm faithful. And it kind of went on for a bit, went on for a bit. And then I think towards the end, production were like, we'd really love to see you have an argument with her. I was like, oh, bring it on. But in like the real world, I actually love Kate. She's such a great person. We chat occasionally outside of the show, but yeah, I would never want to play board games with her because we would both be so competitive.
So how awesome was that slingshot challenge when you're on like the train track and you win that $20,000? Because that looked like really fun. It didn't look like it was like that much like effort other than like aiming for the target.
That was actually the funnest challenge we did. It was the one time we didn't feel like it was a challenge, and I think that's because through clever editing, we actually won that challenge in 5 minutes. So we had half an hour on the clock and we hit every target with the first go. And the crew were just like, we didn't catch any of that because the cameras had no time to catch up with you along the tracks. So we actually won the challenge in 5 minutes. And then like, okay, well, we need to reshoot a lot of it so we actually have content. So like, why don't you just we'll class it off that you've won it. Yep, you guys have won the silver, but we're just gonna get you to play it a couple more times and we're just gonna film it, but like maybe deliberately miss this one. And so that whole challenge was staged completely, but we did genuinely win it at the start. And they just thought, let's reshoot it for TV to make it look a bit more exciting. So it actually, I think that's why it looks like it's a lot of fun because we weren't playing a challenge then. We were just playing around with catapults, and it was actually so much fun. Little did we know that we'd actually left two traders further up the tracks who had the entire day to talk to each other and calculate. So Nigel and Marielle were calculating up the back while we were having fun. So for us, it was a bit of a day off, really. A lot of fun.
Yeah, so what was that feeling when you were being targeted by like Fee, Alex, and Kate, like in that episode?
I I got so fed up with Fee because she is so passionate, which I think anyone should have that trait. It's an incredible trait to have. She didn't back down with anything, but she was also just very stubborn. And what annoys me is that there's an earlier scene where I think it's when they're talking about the whole Jack and Olivia rumor mill, and Fee says, "Oh, but Teresa said that she heard it. She was in like she was there. She was this." And Teresa goes, "Wait, what? Oh, no, 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 no. I was in the car when she said, this happened." And Fee goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. I must have misheard you. I'm so sorry." And then they dropped it. But then there was the whole Angus thing in the water with Nigel, and she's like, "Did I hear you correctly, Angus? Did you say you were going to do this?" And he said, "Oh no, I said this." And then she literally turns around and says, Angus said that he was going to think about murdering Nigel tonight at banishment. And I'm like, that's literally not what was said at all. And then with me, it was the whole what looks like a slip of the tongue, but it's actually there was an entire scene that was filmed that was never shown where I was having afternoon tea with a few other people, and we were talking about how we feel about the whole murder thing because up until the very end, we had no idea when the murders take place. It turns out they happen at breakfast. So we were like, did you get really nervous? And I said, well, look, it has actually made me really, really nervous. So my plan is to just imagine that it's not part of the game. So for me, I was just pretending that we do the challenges and then we get banished so that I wasn't thinking about murder. So I was being less stressed and nervous. And then if it happened, it would happen. So when we were doing the second shield challenge, I think it was the crossbow. Um, Someone said, I was sure it was Alex, said, don't go for me. And I said, well, no one's going to go for you. You're not a suspect. Like, no one thinks you're a traitor. And she's like, no, but you might get murdered. And I said, oh, of course. Yeah, remember, I'm forgetting about that. And it was out of context because I was referencing the conversation I'd had earlier. And then, of course, Feed goes, he's not even thinking about being murdered at all. It's not even on his mind. He must be a traitor. And Kate was just like, oh, yeah, he must be. Um, and then I think by that stage, Alex was a traitor, so she knew to sort of just stay in the background a little bit, I think. Um, yeah, it was a bit kind of annoying because I'm like, great, Fee's got this, and now she's just running with it. And again, she just would not back down about it. No matter how many times I explained to myself, she straight up would just say, well, I don't believe you. I was like, well, you believed everyone else. Why not me? So I got really annoyed with her.
Well, what was that feeling like when you're at the round table? And I bet you thought they were getting banished that night, and then Matt all of a sudden just keeps talking and is digging a grave. And if you didn't do that, I feel like you would have gone home then instead of the following episode. So what was that like?
I was absolutely ready to go home that night. I think once I realized just how bad it was, because our pre-banishment chat that we have is probably about 20 minutes to half an hour, where we just kind of wander around and talk. And that was the first time I'd actually heard that I was the number one target. And it was so shocking for me because I thought, oh, I have no time to go around to everyone and convince them. Also, it's such a difficult thing is once you realize that you're up for banishment, if you then run around and start trying to tell everyone that you're innocent, it looks more suspicious. Um, so I was just like, okay, I'm just going to have to defend myself here. I started panicking. I was feeling really upset. I'd actually never felt ironically, I'd never felt so betrayed before. And I was like, these people are traitors. Like, I'm so nice and lovely. I've never given them anything. Why are they doing this? So then that was the one moment I was like, I can't trust a single person. And then I had Matt coming up to me saying, oh, we need to talk. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, you know who you have to vote for. And I thought, what are you talking about? And he's like, you have to vote for Teresa. That'll clear your name. And I thought, that's going to make me more suspicious. Like, I've never had a reason to vote for Teresa. She's not a traitor, Matt. I said, I'm the one with my like neck on the line here. A vote for Teresa from me would seal my death. And from then on, I was just like, I'm voting for you, Matt. Like, you're insane. So when like we finished the banishment chat and then we had to go up to our rooms just for a bit to rest and get reset before we came back down, And that whole time in our room, I'd started packing my bags. I was like getting ready to leave. I was planning my exit speech. And I thought, there's no changing these people's minds. I'm gonna have like a really beautiful, heartfelt sort of final speech, and then they're gonna vote for me, and then I'm gonna leave, reveal that I'm a faithful, and they're gonna be so upset. And I went in, I like did my plea to them, and then yeah, I was just my whole speech actually went for a good like 15 minutes. And of course I had to edit it down a bit. But the first person that actually responded was Fee, and she's like, I'm in absolute awe of how you spoken. That is so articulate and well put. And she said, there are some things that are still kind of like worrying me, but you've explained yourself so well. And quite a few other people responded with that. And I thought, oh my God, I think I might be in the clear. And then Matt just started it on Teresa again. And I'm like, oh my God, I am in the clear. Like, this is amazing. So I think by that stage as well, everyone had just decided that they had had enough of him. Of course, Kate still voted for me. And I was like, well, shocker. But yeah, the hardest part was when I went back to my room and I thought, oh no, I have to do this again. Like, I have to convince them all again without a distraction of Matt. This is going to be impossible. And it was.
Into your swan song episode, what did you think that morning when nobody was murdered?
Oh, it was it was a weird thing. Like again, whenever they were just like, oh, no one has been murdered or anything like that, we were just like, oh, that means that something else is going to happen. So we I think it was that the morning when we had like the gambling challenge.
Think I think it was, or it was, yeah, it was something. No, that was the gambling was before because Mark was
That's
still
right.
in. Yeah,
Um yeah, it's weird. I'm trying to think of it, but whenever someone was just like, "Oh yeah, no one has been murdered," we would always think, "Okay, that means that something bad is going to happen today." Or it's like it was a bit weird. So I think by that stage we had kind of just given up, like figuring out how the game was being played. Whenever Roger would come in and give us a cryptic clue, we are just like, "Okay, here we go." But yeah, I think what was also crazy is that after I had saved myself. I was the first one down for breakfast, which never happened with me. And it was weird because it was so late in the day as well. And I was convinced, oh, well, I've been murdered. Like, that's it, I'm done. And then they're like, oh no, you're coming down to breakfast. I thought, oh God, I must be the last person there, which I thought, oh no, because then they're going to be like, it's between like two people, and it's always the last person that arrives when obviously that proves that someone has been murdered. Then they think, okay, so I'm going to look even more suspicious now. So then I went down as the first one there and I thought, this is weird. Like, what is going on? And then, of course, Kate is the next one down. I'm like, of course, this is going to make me look more suspicious to her. And it was good, actually, because that was the only time that her and I had ever spent alone. And we actually got to sort of hug each other and say, look, absolutely no hard feelings. I love you. You're incredible. It's just a game. Yeah. And I think that was the one time where she actually said, I don't all like really suspect you. She said, I just threw your name out as like fodder to see if someone would take it. And it's just sort of gone from there. So I was like, okay, all right. It's just, you're just playing. Okay, cool. So, of course, it like went down and went down, and more people arrived. And then I think, yeah, when Teresa didn't turn up, it was incredibly upsetting for everyone because she was like our mum in the group after Claire left. So she was just very like she was the one thing that kind of kept us all going. And I thought this was going to be so hard, especially for Fee. And then she did turn up, and we were just again like just shocked and blown away. So yeah, I was kind of hoping that the attention would shift to other people then, but nope. So I think having no one murdered kind of didn't help my situation either, because then I had no one else to blame. So bit annoying.
Yeah, so you seem to be fighting with Fee on the banishment table because she obviously took that one comment and ran with it for like 3 episodes. So did you try to just ignore it and be like, hey, she's voting for me anyways, who gives a shit? And try to win over other votes? Or at that point, did you just feel like I just want to give up and go home because I'm so sick of dealing with these people?
Pretty much that. I had decided that I was done. So the night before, like when I'd given my speech and convinced everyone to vote for me, uh, I remember standing in like one of the side rooms, or I was in one of like ante rooms somewhere, and all different members of production kept coming up to me saying, "That was incredible. That was like so fun to watch. You need to do this again. You need to win." And I was pretty much being told by production that that had like pinned me to win the game. And I thought that's a lot of pressure. Like, I don't know if I can actually do this again. Because again, it takes 2 days to do one episode. We had like a whole week to go. And I'm like, I honestly don't know if I can survive another week doing this. Like, it is so physically and mentally draining and demanding. Um, and it was just by that stage, everyone had just turned on me. Um, and I was like, it's walking into a room full of vultures. It's like they will just descend on anything. It's getting down to the last minute and everyone's desperate. So there were production actually said to me, like, we've seen your like heartfelt side and your passionate side. Do you reckon we could see your bitchy side a little bit? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. What do you want? They're like, we'd love to see you really argue with Kate. I was like, oh, I could do that. That'd be so much fun. And I was like, especially after that morning when I was like, no hard feelings, I love you, if I just unleashed on her. But Fiona was the one that picked up the bait. And I thought, oh, well, I'm going to turn to you then. And so I think the comment that actually came about was, I think Feeder said, I can't imagine how someone would just say they're not afraid of murder. And I just stopped and said, cool, can I tell you what actually happened then? And that's when her reaction was like, what? And I was like, yeah, so this happened and this happened. And I just explained it again. And I think I even said something along the lines of, but you're too bloody stubborn to actually see what's happening. And you just want to twist everything to suit your narrative. And I don't think anyone expected me to just lose it the way that I did. Um, and I wasn't holding back because I decided that I was going to go. And I thought, if I'm leaving the game, I'm going by being banished. I don't want to be murdered. Like, I'm going by banishment so I can get my last word in. And everyone's kind of like, why are you reacting like this? I said, because you're all a bunch of idiots. Like, you are being so bloody dumb right now. You're listening to one person's version of events who wasn't even there. And I'm like, and that's what's getting you in trouble. Every time that I said, pretty much every time except one that Fiona has said, so and so said this and so said this, that person has been faithful. I'm like, do we actually think that Fiona's maybe a traitor and this is her tactic? And then like, it descended into chaos. And then I was again, just like, this is absolutely bullshit. Like, it's going nowhere. You guys are making the wrong mistake again. And even then, Fiona was like, so you're saying if we vote for you, then we will be making the same mistake, not like you're blaming it on us. And I said, well, yeah, because I'm not going to vote for myself, am I? And she just didn't understand that. And she kept getting confused and twisting things. So I thought, oh, this is going to be so hilarious. So then yeah, it was a bit crazy, just like losing it and arguing with everyone. I thought, well, this is going to get me voted out. So this is going to be great. This is going to work exactly towards my plan.
Yeah, so 2 more questions. So how did you feel about like being banished?
It was a bit bittersweet, actually. So I knew that I was going to get the votes, and then I kind of was just exhausted. And I thought, am I doing the right thing? And it wasn't until Craig voted for me that I actually was genuinely upset because the words that he said to me were so hurtful. Because I had overheard him what I thought he said. Again, I pulled a fee. I was so convinced that he was going to vote for Teresa. And I went to Teresa and I said, I think I just heard Craig say that he was going to vote for you. I said, but don't take my word for it. Like, that's just what I believe I heard, but I could possibly be wrong. So then she brought it up and she's like, well, you said you were going to vote for me. And she said, well, who said that? And she's like, Dirk. And then he turned to me and said, why would I ever? And I said, that's just what I thought I heard. And I said, I didn't say it was gospel. That's what I assumed that I heard. I'm sorry. And then when he voted for me, he's like, the fact that I thought you were my friend and you would put those words in my mouth, that's an awful thing to do. And I was genuinely so upset by having Craig yell at me. Um, and I felt so upset. And that's the one time I actually started crying, real tears. And it was a bit horrible. But then when they finally voted me out, I was like, okay, well, it's what I kind of wanted. So I got up and delivered my little final speech, and then that was it.
Yeah, so unfortunately, Traitors Australia got canceled. But if Traitors World calls for all stars and they take all people from like the UK, American version, Australia, like all English speaking versions, would you do it?
In a heartbeat. I think having that experience, because I was there for a month filming it, and so I got to experience pretty much all of it. Um, I was only back home for about 4 days before I had to fly back and do the promo for it. So I was on set when they had the final episode being filmed. Um, and it was such an incredible experience. And I think as well, showing that side of me where I can be vulnerable and very upset, and then switching it completely to be a bit of a bitch and like misleading everyone, I think it'd be great. And of course, going in with everyone knowing that I'm an actor is going to be an extra challenge for me. But no, if they called and said we're doing like a World Series or whatever it be, All Stars, I would jump on it in a heartbeat. Because some of those other contestants from around the world, oof, if me and Kate from Below Deck were on something, that would be because we've had words on Instagram before the traders, and we don't like each other, so that would be interesting.
Yeah.